5 years ago, Thanos erased half of the population of the universe. But the people of this planet brought everyone back with a snap of a finger. The sudden return of the population provided the necessary energy for the emergence to begin.
How long do we have?
7 days.
We're Eternals. We came here 7,000 years ago to protect humans from the deviants.
Why didn't you guys help fight Thanos? Or any war, all the other terrible things throughout history?
We were instructed not to interfere in any human conflicts unless deviants are involved.
By who?
We need to find the others.
I haven't seen some of them for centuries.
Hi.
Hello.
This is what the end of the world looks like. Means we have front row seats.
You know what's never saved the planet? Your sarcasm.
We've loved these people since the day we arrived. When you love something, you protect it.
You can't protect. Any of them.
I thought you've built the perfect safe house. Well, what's this even made of? Vibranium?
Fall collection. IKEA.
Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Welcome to Thursday's edition of the Movies TV Mad Daily. Don't worry, there's lots of DCEU updates to come and kind of editorials and articles to read. But first, we're going to talk about that trailer we just saw, the final trailer of The Eternals. Now, when I first saw the first pieces of marketing for The Eternals, I thought, this is going to be boring. I'm not interested in this. I can't see this movie doing that well, exciting people. Of course, it's always going to excite MCU Marvel, should I say, Marvel comic book stands. It's The Eternals, after all. But this trailer, all I have to say, Chloe Zhao, I am not fucking worthy to even mispronounce your name. I think we have got a very, very good director here. Of course, she's done other stuff before. She is a great director. I do foresee seeing more Asian directors from Asia itself coming over and making Hollywood movies. I mean, because the depth of talent in Hollywood, American directors, is not that great. And we know they make great movies. There's no question about it. If you actually check out in, Asian indie cinema, you would find out that yourself. But wow, what a trailer. The VFX, the imagery. I think we've got another Zack Snyder on our hands here. I mean, we've been making fun of her, showing her sunsets and stuff. But not only did this please me visually, but emotionally. It has a grand scale to it. I'm not going to pretend I've remembered every single piece of this trailer that we've just watched together. But wow, this is going to be off the scale, isn't it? I'd love to know in the comments down below what you thought of this trailer. For me, it's 10 out of 10. Before I saw this trailer, I had no interest or excitement about seeing this movie. Now, we got Shang-Chi and the Legends of the Ten Rings. That looks like another unique movie, you know, in the MCU this year. Because Black Widow was kind of a goodbye. And now we're saying a hello to the new MCU. You know, Kevin Feige really has to be congratulated. This man goes from strength to strength. This is how you do a franchise. You do one chapter, you end it, then you start another. You let other directors go and bring in new directors. When you've got a producer that not only understands the bureaucratic element of film, but the storytelling and what fans want to see as well. It's just, I envy Marvel Studios. I envy the MCU. I don't want the DCEU to do exactly what they do in the tone and the jokes and all of that. But to have someone like Kevin Feige, of course, I'm very, very envious. And this film, this trailer, because before this trailer, I wasn't excited, but it's brilliant. An all-star cast, the music sounds brilliant, the effects look fantastic. I'm really looking forward to the Eternals in November. Why WB won't be able to escape the Snyder Cut? An article by Brad Curran of Screen Rant. The game changer that Zack Snyder's Justice League has been for the DCEU means that it's not something WB is going to be able to easily move on from, but they will try. Because at the beginning of The Flash, everything he's done will be canon until Barry and Barry reboot the universe, reboot the multiverse, then it won't be anymore. So they are going to attempt to move away from this, Brad. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be able to successfully move away from it. Nobody knows until we see this movie. Zack Snyder's Justice League is not something Warner Brothers will be able to make people forget anytime soon. In the relatively short time frame since the release of the long chanted for Snyder Cut, it has become clear that Warner Brothers has a strong lack of interest in allowing Snyder to wrap up the remainder of his planned 5-movie arc, of which the Snyder Cut represents part 3. Snyder himself has stated this point repeatedly before and since the film's release, even going as far as to describe Warner Brothers as being aggressively anti-Snyder, while the studio itself reportedly regards the film as a storytelling cul-de-sac. Listen, yeah, they're aggressively anti-Snyder, and I think Snyder's aggressively anti-WB. Listen, there's no innocence here, as much as I love Zack's DC movies, and would love to see more. Pulling aside that the amount of groundwork film lays for future storytelling makes it anything but a cul-de-sac, such a description of the Snyder Cut represents a stark contrast against not just what it was before it was released, but what it's become since then. Moreover, when laid up against Warner Brothers' own purported plans for DC films, the Snyder Cut, along with the unmade movies that it sets up, has not been the cut and dried finale that many expected it to be. The film's release has led to widespread calls for more of Snyder's story, with the new hashtag #RestoreTheSnyderverse. As of right now, Warner Brothers has displayed no intention of giving the Snyderverse the green light. However, the situation is no longer as simple as fans pushing for the renewal of a cancelled TV show, the continuation of a film series after the most recent entry bombed, or even the initial campaign for the Snyder Cut itself. Between the currently articulated plans for the DCEU by Warner Brothers, the popularity of the Snyder Cut has seen, and the interest that has arisen in the Snyderverse being restored. The Snyder Cut, and by extension the Snyderverse, are now the elephant in the room for the entire franchise, as is Ray Fisher's controversial dismissal from The Flash. Again, Brad, great article, great journalist, I love ya, but he wasn't removed from The Flash. He removed himself because he said he won't work with Walter Hamada or WB until he gets an apology. He restated it the other day. No one's removed Ray Fisher. Ray Fisher removed himself. When discussing the growing interest in seeing Snyder's 5-part arc finished, it's important to remember the Snyder Cut being released at all was very much an uphill battle. following consistent denials of the movie's very existence, a major social media blitz on the 2-year anniversary of the theatrical version's release finally pushed it past the point of no return, with news that the Snyder Cut would debut on HBO Max arriving on May the 20th, 2020. Even then, Warner Bros. Repeatedly showed clear disinterest in continuing Snyder's story beyond that point. I think they were interested. I really do. That's why they all agreed to do it in chapters. I think that was the whole point, to do a Justice League 2, Justice League 3, all on HBO Max. But the relationship between WB and Snyder yet again broke down. That's why they're not restoring the Snyderverse. There's a truth to be told here, and the studio will tell that truth eventually. From the first proposing simply releasing the cut unfinished on HBO Max, to asking Snyder to remove Wayne T. Carr's Green Lantern from the final scene, with Snyder replacing him with Martian Manhunter, Warner Bros. Has been adamant that Snyder's arc not continue beyond the Snyder Cut, though getting the film itself released took significant effort on the part of both fans and Snyder. It nevertheless came to pass. What's more, while ignoring the release of the Snyder Cut hashtag might have been one thing, now that the move is out for the whole world to see and has been all around quite well received, numerous factors are significantly complicating and even impeding the studio's desire to simply move on. By being a movie long suppressed from general release, one that had to be campaigned for so strenuously, there was an almost mythic nature about the Snyder Cut before it was announced, knowing the version of the movie released in 2017 was clumsily cobbled together with last-minute reshoots and the haphazard digital removal of Henry Cavill's Mission Impossible Fallout moustache. The story of Snyder's original version being held back for so long made it into a sort of modern-day movie legend. Snyder's social media teases of the film only strengthened the determination of the fans to keep pushing for it, as these were contrasted with continuous assertions that the film itself did not exist in any releasable form, or on more subjective level within social media chatter that it wouldn't be a substantial improvement on the theatrical cut. Adding to this was the fact that Warner Bros. Could not get DC movies out from under the Snyder Cut shadow, and while Aquaman and Joker both surpassed 1 billion worldwide, the Snyder Cut reliably popped up in some way popped up in some way every time a new DC movie was hitting theatres. Jason Momoa's own open advocacy for its release during the Aquaman press tour being one of the bigger powder kegs for the film. When the Snyder Cut was finally released, the path to that point told as much of a story as the movie itself. Even massive tentpoles are seldom and quite possibly never released under anything like the kind of circumstances that the Snyder Cut has been, and the specifics of how it happened have made the film a much bigger deal than ever. With that, and how the Snyder Cut ends with a setup for further movies in the Snyderverse, the movie's story is also an ongoing one. Aside from its basic popularity as a movie, the term Snyder Cut itself has taken on a life of its own. Release the Snyder Cut has specifically entered speech within conversations around the film industry as a shorthand for undoing an artistic error, being translated into High Valerian in a 2019 Game of Thrones promo, and being spoofed on The Simpsons as unreleased the Snyder Cut. The heinous clothing brand similarly jumped in with a clothing charity drive organised on social media using the Snyder Cut and Snyderverse hashtags, similar to Subway's previous entry into the charitable swing of the Snyder Cut campaign in late 2019. The term has even seeped into the conversation of Snyder's newest movie, Army of the Dead, with Netflix assuring viewers on Twitter that this is the Snyder Cut. Outside of the movie's term, the term Snyder Cut is increasingly used to reference an alternate, unseen, better version just about of anything, from the outcome of a sporting event to the entirety of the year 2020. The Snyder Cut as both a term and a movie has in essence become a staple of chatter around filmmaking superhero movies, DC films and social media, beginning as a hashtag that fueled debate but which many believed would never bear fruit. The Snyder Cut is now a wholly mainstream topic, and one Snyder himself is regularly asked about in interviews. Snyder's even continuing to periodically drop more information about the film. his overall intentions for the franchise, such as an image of Carl's Green Lantern, while Joe Manganiello has done the same himself with respect to Ben Affleck's Batman movie and the Deathstroke origin film. All of that leads right into the final factor that's preventing the Snyder Cut and the Restore the Snyderverse hashtag from fading away. Though Warner Brothers has stated their stance on not continuing the Snyderverse, the audience for the Snyder Cut has reacted in the opposite way. Calls for Snyder's arc to be finished swiftly arose after the Snyder Cut was seen. Indeed, it's drawn support from far more than the fans who pushed for the Snyder Cut itself to happen, including from celebrities, some big celebrities like Brad Paisley, who tweeted Restore the Snyderverse hashtag, or Leslie Jones, who performed the comedy-filled commentary of the movie. There's also a good amount of detail known about where Snyder intended to take things, courtesy of a collection of whiteboards displayed at an AT&T exhibit earlier this year. Though Snyder has asserted subsequent behind-the-scenes alterations make them more of a loose blueprint than a beat-for-beat layout. The basic outline of Justice League 2 and Justice League 3 continues to drive growing interest in seeing the story completed. Similarly, Joe Manganiello's description of elements of both Affleck's Batman movie and the Deathstroke film have also fueled interest, with both being projects set within the Snyderverse. By contrast, while Warner Brothers has a number of exciting movies in the works, they haven't managed to build enough hype to distract the persistent interest in Snyder's original plans. But there is hype behind next year's movies, Brad. There's no question about that. Additionally, the cancellation of the in-development New Gods and Aquaman spin-off The Trench in particular highlights the abundance of announced DC movies that have never gotten off the ground. Yeah, those two projects were always going to go down the wayside. I did warn everyone about New Gods. Ava DuVernay just wasn't the right person to do it. They never went and attached the movie to her. She was trying to pitch it. They never said you're doing it. That's the difference there, Brad. And the point being, yes, two projects quite a while ago now have gone by the wayside, but the Aquaman spin-off will be represented in the Aquaman Aquaman sequel. I can assure you of that. So I think really your kind of thread here is a little bit thin. Though numerous DC movies are either actively filming, such as Black Adam, or have completed production like Matt Reeves' The Batman, the studio has not managed to communicate a concise narrative plan for the franchise. Well, that's not actually true, is it, Brad? We know from the Flash movie onwards, everything will have a connected strand. We're opening up the walls of the multiverse, and it's very exciting. The multiverse strategy is the plan, so we do know the plan. Now, really, the movies were basically the Batman, Black Adam. Yeah, the Batman and Black Adam have nothing really to do with the multiverse strategy. They're pre-multiverse strategy. So really, they can do what they want with those films. It's really the Flash and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom that will be part of this new strategy. So there is a strategy and a plan, Brad. The intervening months since last year's DC fandom have begun to negatively impact the hype around DC movies and TV shows. Not true, Brad. Coexisting in a multiverse due to the studio's inability to articulate concrete plans what they intend to do with it all. Well, no, as I've told you, Brad, that's not true. Warner Brothers' assertion that they are moving on from the Snyderverse has not been followed by clear commensurate plans for what they plan to do instead. Yes, there's a concrete plan, Brad. You're supposed to be a journalist, don't you know? All the while, the basic outline for the Snyderverse, whether in the Justice League sequels or related projects like Affleck's Batman film and the Deathstroke movie, have been far more clearly laid out, with interest in them continuing to grow. With the Snyder Cut out and calls for the Snyderverse return continuing, the blueprint that's been presented for the unrealised films in Snyder's arc is doubtlessly going to continue to loom over DC movies, just as the Snyder Cut itself once did. Whether Warner Brothers will have a change of heart on their present stance on the Snyderverse and what would need to take place for that to happen remain major question marks. What is not unknown, though, is that Zack Snyder's Justice League and the roadmap that is set up have opened a door that's now never going to be closed. Let me just make sure this is a new article, because I saw Brad retweet this. Let's have a look. I'm just interested. No, it's an old one. I've read this before. Never mind, because it's interesting. I think it's an interesting reread. he basically retweeted it. So there's nothing wrong with us reading it again. But yeah, basically I'm going to reiterate what I said at the time. I like Zack's DC movies. I want the Snyderverse restored. I want the Batfleck movie made. And I want Manganiello's Deathstroke movie made, because it would be awesome, the whole thing. But to say that they don't have a concise plan is simply not true, because in fact, at DC Fandom, Brad, they announced their plan. The multiverse strategy. The Flash movie will reboot everything. They'll start from scratch. Nothing will be forgotten. Everything will be remembered. That's what they've told us. There's a plan. It's happening. And let me tell you something else, Brad, which is very interesting to me as well. The movie fans, geeks and nerds are very fickle. Fickle, not thick, fickle. Other people can call us fans thick if they want, that's fine, but I'm saying fickle. What does fickle mean? After the Flash movie, I think people are going to, let's just say, close that door a little bit more. I don't want that to happen. I want Zack's, journey to be completed, and I want Ben's Batman to continue, and maybe it will. But if the Flash movie is as good as I think it's going to be, and people like Michael Keaton, and we'll read his interview about the Flash movie very shortly, he's been saying a lot of things. But Keaton's assertion on how good this movie is, DJ Desjardins, the special effects supervisor, Zack's own VFX guy, saying how amazing it is and how revitalized he felt after the script. He felt like the DCEU was going down a boring direction, but with the Flash, he's very excited. That's interesting. Interesting seeing he's a Zack Snyder loyalist and always worked with Zack. That's interesting that these people who love Zack, and who I'm sure want to restore the Snyderverse as well, are saying great things about this new strategy. So, Brad, I don't agree with you, but I do agree on one thing, that we want to see the Snyderverse restored. And it can be over on HBO Max, on a separate universe, Elseworld. But trying to say that there's no plan simply isn't going to work anymore. They made a bundle of money on the Suicide Squad over on HBO Max. They did well with the Snyder Cut as well, by the way. My assertion is that it's the most successful streaming event of all time. So they've done well this year with DC. But next year is the year. Next year is if we're going to find out if there's a future for the DCEU. From Black Widow to Shang-Chi, superhero cinema confronts an uncertain box office future. Well, do you know what? They're making this about superheroes. This is from Variety and Adam B. Vary. But why aren't they talking about cinema in general? Because cinema in general is the one in trouble, not superheroes. Any red carpet premiere for a Marvel Studios movie is an over-the-top event, and the gala opening for Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings on Monday night was no exception. Disney shut down Hollywood Boulevard in front of the El Captain Theatre, where throngs of costumed and masked fans crowded the sidewalks on either side as stars Simu Liu and Awkwafina potentially walked down the socially distanced press line, talking up everything from how the film marks a milestone for Asian representation to its many elaborate and kinetic action scenes. There was an unmistakable buzz of excitement in the air, but it was also tinged with something the MCU hasn't had to confront in a decade: anxiety. When Shang-Chi opens on September the 3rd, it will be Marvel Studios' first exclusive theatrical release in over 2 years, and for the first time since the earliest days of the studio, with rising COVID cases starting to trigger vaccine mandates, no one really knows how it will perform at the box office. Well, I've made my prediction. People are saying 15 million. That's what Disney have said. I don't think it's going to make 15 million. We've had this conversation before. I think it's going to do extremely well. I think it could reach 40 million, maybe even 50. I think people are going to be surprised. If you care about cinema, if you care about the MCU and you want to prove that superheroes are not dying out, go watch this movie, because I think this is going to be a unique one. And I'm a DC stan, and I would normally laugh if a Marvel movie failed, but I kind of like the look of this one, and we've just been talking about Eternals. That looks great as well. Go to the movie theatre to see that if you can as well. One need look no further than how Kevin Feige, Marvel Chief Creative Officer, answered Variety's question on the Shang-Chi red carpet about Disney choosing a theatrical release for the film rather than day and date in theatres and on Disney Plus Premier Access like with Marvel's Black Widow in July. I love making movies for people to see in a shared environment in a theatre together, he said, with a smile underlining the same point he's reportedly made inside Disney's C-suite offices. To us, that's what it's about. After dutifully plugging Disney's hybrid strategy, that the hybrid release, it can also be good. You want customers to have the choice. Feige then poked fun at the industry consensus to have the old 90-day theatrical window. Never going to happen. You know, from next year, it's going to be about 46 days. I know how everybody's talking about 45 days, this magic new number, he said. Here's what I know. There's an opening weekend and you can go see a movie. And that's what I'm excited to do. Basically, he didn't want to, answer the question. It is going to be 45 days, like it or lump it. For someone who 2 years ago opened 3 movies, Captain Marvel, Avengers, Endgame and Spider-Man Far From Home, that collectively grossed over $5 billion in the global box office returns, it's telling that Feige felt compelled to urge audiences to see Shang-Chi on opening weekend because more than just about anyone, Feige knows what it means if they don't. Only a few years ago, lesser known or outright obscure comic book characters, the Guardians of the Galaxy and Doctor Strange for Marvel, the Suicide Squad and Shazam for DC could still headline their own movies and pull in an ample fortune. But since the DC adaptation of Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of One Harley Quinn with Margot Robbie flopped in February 2020, the box office power of superhero cinema has evaporated as if snapped away by Thanos' fingers. Now, I'll talk about this because what Adam is doing, he's creating a fictional, illusionary narrative, which simply isn't the truth. Cinema is struggling, not just superhero movies. Superhero movies are doing fine. Put them on streaming, people will watch them and they'll make millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions, right? Billions off of them. Cinema is the jukebox, right? Cinema is the jukebox. Streaming is the vinyl player. That's it. It's as simple as that. Now this guy can go on, but it's irrelevant. And now we've got a map of the falling kind of money that superhero movies make in cinema. But unfortunately, he's missing out a big list. The list of the rest of the movies. How much are they making? It's just as sad reading as the superhero movies. But the superhero movies will still make money on streaming. Now it's very interesting because Bob Chapek is right. This is an interesting experiment. Shang-Chi, in the crux of the COVID pandemic and the Delta variant, is going to be exclusively in theatres. This is not just important for superhero movies in the future in movie theatres. This is the future of movie theatres in America and the world we're talking about. Because if this movie doesn't make big money on an exclusive theatrical release, cinemas are officially dead. It's as simple as that. Obviously, COVID-19 is the main villain here. Oh my God! So what's the point of making this narrative? And its impact has been indiscriminative across the entire film industry, but for Marvel, which is in May released an emotional 3-minute tribute to the power of seeing the movies in a theatre, including footage of crowds cheering during Endgame, the impact has been especially unsparing, delaying a year's worth of interconnected features and Disney Plus series that are locked in to a specific release order. When Black Widow finally did open in July, it swiftly became the best performing movie of the pandemic era. But that's only relatively speaking. If the film's current trajectory holds, it will also be the first MCU movie since 2015's Ant-Man to make less than $200 million at the domestic box office. And it could be the first to make under $500 million worldwide since 2011's Captain America: The First Avenger. Listen, what did they spend on this movie? 150, 180. It didn't look like an expensive movie, no disrespect to the people who made it and who were in it. I think maybe 150 million. So let's say they make around 400 million. It's still a good profit. And what about what they made on Disney Plus as well with sponsorships? And the day and date, the Premier Access, there's no problems here. They can make more on streaming than they could ever make in cinema anyway. Cinemas are dead. To be fair, there's a degree to which Black Widow's box office performance was expected even before the pandemic. In fact, Black Widow performed pretty well. What is it on? 340 million, 350 million right now? That's not bad for the pandemic era, right? They're taking a loss in cinemas, but over on streaming, it's all going very well. So it really doesn't matter. What Marvel did with the building up to the Avengers is one of those things that is going to be very difficult to be repeated, even for Marvel, says Jeff Bock, industry analyst with Exhibitor Relations. He likens the MCU's 2021 feature slate of Black Widow, Shang-Chi and Eternals to a kind of box office reset, sending the MCU back to its earliest days. So we have to think in terms of the expectations for Iron Man or even Captain America or Thor. He's right, but this is not just about Marvel or superheroes. This is the industry in general. It's going to streaming. Now, I don't know if we're ever going to change, if the world's going to change back to normal, if we're ever going to get after the pandemic, or if COVID is always going to be a thing and we're always going to get strange and this is the way we're going to have to live, that it is streaming all the way. And movie theatres will be a thing of the past. I'm sorry. Now, if we do get reset back to the old way and there's a snap back, right, using an MCU formula, will movie theatres just come back in? I would expect so. If there wasn't any COVID now, people would prefer the movie theatre experience. We're just going to have to wait and see. But while Black Widow's 158 million global debut matched with 60 million via Premier Access, according to the studio, remains a pandemic-era record, the film dropped 69% at the domestic box office in its second weekend, almost certainly thanks to its day-and-date release. I said this at the time, and I'll be a bit more, I'll dial back on what I said before, but I think it's a mixture of day and date and it not being very rewatchable. It wasn't the greatest of movies, it was okay. That provoked a sharp rebuke from the National Association of Theatre Owners, which asserted that the movie would have made far more had it opened in theatres exclusively. A belief shared by star Scarlett Johansson, who remains locked in a lawsuit with Disney over lost back-end earnings on the film. Moreover, NATO argued that whatever Black Widow has made on Premier Access is effectively an advance on traditional post-theatrical revenues, winnowing the movie's downstream earnings potential further. Disney has declined to release the subsequent VOD revenue figures for Black Widow. I've already explained to you before. Let's just put this down for a minute. Let me explain to you before. You're never going to see their VOD figures. You're never going to see the actual cash HBO Max makes from having day and date or big films or even things like Batgirl next year and Green Lantern's Corps. They're never going to tell you the hard cash they make because it's triple what they make in the movie theatre releases. They have to share what they make with movie theatre companies. So now they can make more on streaming. So publicly they say they believe in the movie theatre, but they don't. And they can't wait until it's dead, as the jukebox. It should be no surprise that Black Widow's performance has been so contentious. While box office has suffered across the board, the theatrical health of superhero movies, especially Marvel's, which are true for quadrant blockbusters, is of particular importance to exhibitors, given how dominant the genre has been in the marketplace for so long. With the theatrical business as precariously positioned as it's ever been, if studios taper down the biggest commercial draw for theatres, it could further weaken the entire sector. Since Black Widow, the box office landscape itself has only grown dimmer, typified by the Suicide Squad, which debuted day and date on HBO Max, opening with just 26.2 million domestically, compared with the 133.7 million opening weekend of its 2016 predecessor. Suicide Squad, similar to Black Widow, in its second weekend, Suicide Squad dropped at a sharp 72%. Some of the financial fallout here can be blamed on the surge in the Delta variant COVID cases, predominantly among the unvaccinated, which has further depressed consumer confidence in public venues. But that isn't the only reason. You don't go from 133 million to 26 million. There's other factors at play than the pandemic. Boggs says he points to title confusion. The film's R rating and explicit violence, and especially a cast lacking any A-list DC characters, all due respect to Harley Quinn as other major culprits. I just think we've come to that saturation point where audiences are sort of tired of these superhero films, especially if they're superheroes that they've never heard of. Now, that's a lie, that's untrue, and that's coming from an agenda. Listen, I reckon there's some movie buffs, right, even younger people, who can't stand superhero movies and are very depressed that all we get are superhero movies. I'm a Capes fan, and I'm pissed off that all we get is superhero movies. I want this to carry on, but I want a variety of art and content and movies and TV to be made, and we're not getting it. But at the end of the day, the audience isn't tired of this. If they're tired of this, why do I go on my TikTok and people are going, "Where is the No Way Home trailer?" on my Twitter feed? Why does a no-mark like me sometimes get 100 views talking about Capes? And believe you me, no advertising. Nobody knows who I am. That's pretty good. 40 or 50 views. That's good for someone who doesn't, tell everyone where I am and repeatedly shares my videos all day. It means that Capes are still popular. So he's not speaking the truth. This is wishful thinking. People are not fed up of Capes, and ultimately film is moving to streaming, whether you like it or not. The marketplace is certainly saturated with superhero content like never before, in no small part due to streaming. By the end of 2021, Marvel Studios alone is set to have released 4 features and 6 series on Disney+, with at least another 19 titles in play for 2022 and beyond. Warner Brothers and Sony Pictures are similarly bullish on superheroes, featuring their features and streaming slates with comic book titles, many of them with characters that indeed many have never heard of, like Morbius, Kraven the Hunter for Sony Pictures, and Black Adam. Nobody's heard of Black Adam, really? And Blue Beetle for Warner Brothers and New Line. Yeah, a lot of people haven't heard of it, but it's streaming. People are going to give it a check. It's DC. People will be interested. All 3 studios have A-list superhero titles in their immediate pipelines. Spider-Man No Way Home for Sony, The Batman for Warner Brothers, and Thor Love and Thunder, and Black Panther Wakanda Forever for Marvel Studios. But even if those movies are enormous blockbusters, the broader theatrical outlook for superhero movies is far from clear. Sony, which has no streaming service, remains committed to an exclusive theatrical release. For how long for? In December for No Way Home, which promises to be one of the highest grossing films of the year, but the studio also pushed Venom, Let There Be Carnage from September to October due to COVID concerns. Warner Brothers has committed to a 45-day window for its major features starting in 2022, but the studio has already slated lesser-known titles it's developing, like Blue Beetle, the first major superhero film with a Latino lead character, to premiere instead on HBO Max. Disney, meanwhile, remains contractually bound to give 20th Century Studios movies like Free Guy and West Side Story exclusive theatrical runs until the expiration in early 2022 of a 10-year output deal with HBO. Otherwise, the studio has not yet officially committed to exclusive theatrical runs for its movies beyond Shang-Chi. That puts Marvel's latest film in a unique and perhaps impossible position of serving as a bellwether for the theatrical future of superhero cinema. Disney declined to comment to the record for this story. The insiders say that when studio announced in May that it was opening Shang-Chi exclusively in theatres over Labor Day weekend, it was with the belief that the pandemic was finally waning and Shang-Chi would be the company's first salvo in helping get the theatrical business back to health. Then the Delta variant hit. In an earnings call in August, Disney CEO Bob Chapek characterized Shang-Chi as an interesting experiment that will help guide future exhibition strategy by the way of defending his decision not to put the movie on Premier Access, a format Chapek otherwise lauded for helping to provide the studio with flexibility and drive subscribers to Disney+. When considering the ever bleaker pandemic theatrical landscape, coupled with the fact that Labor Day weekend has historically been one of the lowest grossing weekends of the year, Boggs says he doesn't see how Shang-Chi could possibly perform well enough for Disney to justify not returning to a day-and-date model for Marvel studio films. Well, these studios can't win, can they? They do day-and-date and they're slaughtered. They don't do day-and-date and they're slaughtered. Obviously, Disney wants to be a huge success, but in terms of what audiences want, I just don't personally see the numbers, he says. From what I think we've heard from the brass at Disney, they're going to continue to play that works best for Disney after Shang-Chi. I think they're going to continue to go with Premier Access until the pandemic is eradicated, and even then, I don't know that they will completely change. No, it's the same, isn't it, as now? When Blu-ray first came out, you get stuff on DVD and Blu-ray. Now you get less DVD copies being released and more Blu-ray and 4K. This is what's going to happen. It's DVD and Blu-ray all over again. You can see in cinemas or streaming. This is the future. Insiders counter that Marvel has had great success with non-traditional weekends for films like Black Panther, which opened in February, and Captain Marvel, which opened in March, and the studio remains committed to maximising Shang-Chi's box office success. If any brand can do well over Labor Day, it's Marvel, says one source with direct knowledge of Disney's strategy. As for Marvel's next feature, Eternals, from Oscar-winning director Chloe Zhao, insiders say the studio is committed to a theatrical release in November, but as with every feature title, decisions will be made about whether the film will also debut on Premier Access based up to date market conditions and the status of the pandemic. Whatever call the studio makes, it will likely have to happen around early September, right when Shang-Chi debuts in theatres, so they can use, that's why they're calling it an interesting experiment. Do you get it? At the Shang-Chi premiere, Variety also asked Feige about whether Eternals would be released day and date on Disney Plus Premier Access or in theatres alone. I think a theatre would be my preference and Chloe's preference, Feige said before gesturing to the cinema about to unspool Shang-Chi. We will see where we go with it. Wow, very interesting. A big, interesting article, but a lot of it is bullshit. Superhero cinema isn't the only victim here. The whole of the movie theatrical system is suffering. So yeah, you can give me a graph of superhero movies making less than they used to, but then I can give you a graph of every single movie that's been released in movie theatres since the pandemic started, and they've all suffered. This is not a superhero problem, this is a movie theatre problem, and we are seeing slowly but surely the end of the movie theatre. Suicide Squad 3 should revive the abandoned Superman hunt story. By Nicholas Raymond of Screen Rant. James Gunn recently revealed that he wanted the team to fight Superman in the Suicide Squad. It didn't happen, but it could work for the sequel. You know what? Is there going to be a sequel? It'll be very interesting. I think we're just going with spin-offs on HBO Max from here on forth. But I will give you my opinion on this. Look, when we finish this article. Suicide Squad 3 could revive James Gunn's Superman idea. Recently, the Suicide Squad director revealed that before settling on the overpowered Starro, the Conqueror for Task Force X's opponent in the new movie, he envisioned the last son of Krypton as the main antagonist. However, it didn't work out. However, there may be a way that a potential Suicide Squad prequel could reintroduce the Superman idea Gunn had in the first place. Gunn's reasons for not using Superman actually reflect the thoughts of a large number of viewers. As things stand, DC's position on Superman seems unclear. Henry Cavill is the current version of Superman in the DCEU, but his absence from recent and upcoming releases have been taken as signs that the studio is done with the actor and may make the protagonist of Ta-Nehisi Coates' Superman its primary incarnation of the Big Blue Boy Scout. Now, this is obviously going to be set on another Earth, this Superman, but maybe because people will be crossing over from one Earth to the other with the multiverse strategy. But no, the DCEU needs its Superman, whether it's Cavill or somebody else. Preferably, I want it to be Cavill. Plus, there are questions about whether or not Gunn's The Suicide Squad exists in the same continuity as Henry Cavill's Superman. Gunn's comments show that he may have the same concerns about Superman's role. Listen. It's in the DCEU Earth 1. Gunn has said that many times. This held Gunn back from putting Superman in the Suicide Squad, but hopefully the confusion surrounding the character will be resolved ahead of Suicide Squad 3. If Gunn returns to direct, Superman would feel like the perfect antagonist for Bloodsport's Task Force X team, not unlike what's happening with Rocksteady's Suicide Squad video game, where Superman and the Justice League will be the main villains. As the most powerful person on the planet, regardless of who's playing him, Superman would certainly pose a significant threat to the team on that the Suicide Squad would struggle to walk away from in one piece. A Suicide Squad versus Superman story could work despite Kal-El's heroic reputation. Yeah, because why would we want Superman to be a hero, right? One idea Gunn mentioned, which was Superman getting out of hand, would further complicate the continuity issue, especially since it would mean turning the hero into an outright villain, a la the Injustice video games. The other possibility suggested by Gunn, the mind control option, would make a lot more sense. Yeah, I'd be down for that one at least. That's because while Superman letting loose with his powers in an R-rated movie sounds exciting, A hero as deeply loved as him has to be handled carefully. The mind control explanation can enable DC to use Superman as the villain without risk of ruining his character, which is of the utmost importance. It could be a fun and better alternative to the much talked about Bloodsport prequel idea. The reveal that Idris Elba's character shot Superman has had quite a few discussing the possibility of DC revisiting the concept with its own movie. But the problem with that is that the ending is already known. Plus, it wouldn't advance Bloodsport's story, but Suicide Squad 3 with Superman as the target, on the other hand, certainly would putting the Man of Steel in the hospital is an impressive feat. And for that reason, he would be on the government's radar if Superman were ever to go rogue. The issue for Bloodsport is that beating him a second time may not be so easy. A ruthless and evil Superman could prove to be a much more challenging adversary for any potential ideas around the Suicide Squad. It would take an entire team of villains to bring him down, and even that might not be enough. Listen, even WB, who a lot of you criticise all the time, was smart enough to say, no. We're trying to move away from that, from Zack Snyder's universe, because some people feel that Snyder's gone towards evil Superman, which I don't agree with, by the way. But the last thing the character of Superman needs is to be a fucking villain being chased by the fucking Suicide Squad and having Harley Quinn and Bloodsport standing on his body being smug that they've beaten him. Superman is the most important character in fiction, especially to me, and you can't be slapping this character around. Gunn had decided because he's not a Superman fan, but Warner Brothers are a Superman fan and they're very careful with Superman. And you know, they've been very protective in the past. That's why they never allowed Tim Burton's Superman Lives film to come out. And this was very important to say, you know, James, we said you could do anything you want, but leave Superman the fuck alone. This is one of the worst ideas of any idea I've ever heard. And personally, I'm glad it didn't happen, and I expect it to never happen. Michael Keaton secretly always wanted to return to Batman. Michael Keaton is reprising his role as Batman in The Flash after decades away, but the star says that he always wanted to play Bruce Wayne again, by Rick Stevenson of Screen Rant. Michael Keaton says that he always wanted to return to the role of Batman even before being cast in The Flash. The star was the first to bring Bruce Wayne to life on the big screen in Tim Burton's Batman 1989 and the sequel Batman Returns 1992, paving the way for the modern era of Dark Knight films. After decades away from the DC Universe, Keaton is finally reprising his Batman role in The Flash, something he's apparently wanted to do for a long time. In the midst of the ongoing confusion over the future of the DCEU, Keaton's impending return to Gotham City has been a unanimously celebrated development. His original 1989 outing as the Caped Crusader remains a fan favourite, and after a rocky few years for both the character and DC's live-action films at large, it should be fun to see the Flash return to Batman's cinematic roots. Ben Affleck's Batman is also set to return in The Flash for the first time since Justice League, possibly setting up a confrontation between the two. Wouldn't that be fun? Speaking recently with THR, Keaton said that he was excited at the prospect of returning in The Flash because playing Batman one more time has always been something he wanted to do. One more time, wouldn't that debunk the rumours that this version of Batman was going to become the Earth 1 version of Batman in the DCEU? Or maybe he's just saying that to confuse us. Who knows? Comment down below, what do you think? Frankly, in the back of my head, I always thought, I bet I could go back and nail that motherfucker. Keaton said, teasing that should be an exciting rendition of an older, more seasoned Bruce Wayne. The actor revealed that he felt even more in tune with the character and its legacy this time around, which bodes well for The Flash. For now, Keaton's actual role in The Flash remains shrouded in mystery. It's known that he'll appear when Ezra Miller's Barry Allen travels to a parallel universe, similar to the events of the famous Flashpoint comic. But beyond that, it's unclear how the elder Bruce Wayne will play into the story regardless. There's sure to be plenty of references to and Easter eggs from the Burton films. Keaton's return has been so widely celebrated by fans that some have even called for the actor to get his own new solo Batman movie. Others still have pushed for a live-action Batman Beyond movie starring Keaton as Bruce Wayne. For now, there are no confirmed plans for Keaton to continue in the role in the future, but if he's as excited to be donning the Batman costume again, as he says, The Flash might not be the last time DC fans get to see his version of the character suit up. Now, I believe maybe this will be a one and done. Who knows? Who knows? But I do believe the DCEU Earth 1, when they reboot the multiverse, will create a brand new, younger Batman. Now, a lot of people believe Batgirl is replacing Batman, but here's the thing about that. They're shoving her on HBO Max. That would say that she's not going to be the be-all and end-all of the DCEU, doesn't it? Although, if streaming is the future, like I keep on professing, maybe that doesn't count her out. We will have to wait and see. Oh, Michael Keaton's doing a lot of talking, and sir, I'm so happy for it. Michael Keaton understands Batman more thanks to The Flash. Michael Keaton says he now understands Batman more after reprising his role as Bruce Wayne, the Caped Crusader in the upcoming Flash by Paddy Wilson of Screen Rant. Michael Keaton said that his return as Bruce Wayne Batman in the upcoming Flash helped him understand Batman on a whole new level. Keaton first donned the Caped Crusader's costume for Tim Burton's Batman '89, reprising the role in '92's Batman Returns. His casting drew some controversy at the time, as he was seen as primarily a comedic actor. Ultimately, however, Keaton drew praise for his performance of the tormented Bruce Wayne, to the extent that over 20 years later he will reprise his role in The Flash. Directed by Andy Muschietti, 2022's The Flash sees Ezra Miller's Barry Allen travel back in time to prevent his mother's murder, which leads to changes in his timeline. Drawing on the Flashpoint storyline from comics, the film will introduce different incarnations of well-known superheroes. Alongside Keaton, Ben Affleck will return as Batman, and Sasha Calle joins the DCEU as Supergirl. As with the MCU did with Loki, DCEU may set up its own version of the multiverse, allowing heroes and villains, past and present, to return. That's exactly what's going to happen, and this is going to be the future of DC live action. Speaking with The Hollywood Reporter about reprising one of his most famous roles, Keaton said that returning the character in The Flash helped him understand Batman much more. The 69-year-old described his understanding of the character as on a whole other level. Keaton also noted how his respect for the character had increased with the realization that the role had iconic and a giant thing culturally. Read the full quote below. What's really interesting is how much more I got Batman when I went back and did him. I get this on a whole other level now. I totally respect it. I respect what people are trying to make. I never look at it like, oh, this is just a silly thing. It was not a silly thing when I did Batman, but it has become a giant thing culturally. It's iconic, so I have an even more respect for it, because what do I know? This is a big deal in the world to people. You've got to honour that and be respectful of that. Even if I go, Jesus, this is huge. Wow, well done, Michael Keaton. That's what we want to hear from actors, even if they mean it or not. That's what fans want to hear as well. Keaton is not the first superhero to reprise his role after time away. In 2019's Arrowverse crossover, Crisis on Infinite Earths, Brandon Routh reprised his role as Superman 14 years after donning the red cape. In 2006, Superman Returns. Kevin Conroy also... I'm not doing well today, am I? Kevin Conroy also appeared as an aged Bruce Wayne in live action for the first time. Many rumours are swirling around the MCU's Spider-Man No Way Home about the return of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield as multiverse incarnations of the web-slinger. At the same time, Alfred Molina's Doc Ock is confirmed 17 years after Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. While it remains unclear how big of a role Keaton will have in The Flash, his feelings of increased respect for and understanding of the character might bode well for the return beyond The Flash. Keaton has also spoken about the emotion he felt when shooting his Batman's reintroduction in The Flash. While Batman may have become a big deal in Keaton's words compared to when he originally donned the cowl, Muschietti's film will pay homage to Burton's Batman. Beyond bringing back Keaton, Burton and Keaton's Batmobile and Batcave will also return in The Flash. Keaton will next be seen in the action thriller The Protégé, before reprising his role as Adrian Toomes' Vulture in the MCU's Morbius. This guy is 69 years old. He's in live action Marvel, he's in live action DC. I'm so happy for him, because he is one of the great actors, and you should go and watch him with Melanie Griffiths and Matthew Modine in Pacific Heights. He's so fucking frightening as a psychotic lodger. You should really check him out. So exciting though to have our Batman back as well. And this is the final article with quotes from Michael Keaton about him returning as Bruce Wayne Batman in the Flash movie. The Flash's multiverse was very confusing for Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton admits that he needed to read the Flash's script a few times to properly understand how the DCEU's multiverse works by Rachel Abernathy of Screen Rant. Michael Keaton admits it took him some time to understand the Flash's approach to the multiverse. The DCEU solo Flash movie has been in the works for some time now, but it has only just begun to make real progress. Ezra Miller will once again speed into the big screen as Barry Allen, aka The Flash, for the movie which will arrive in theatres in November 2022. Directed by Andy Muschietti, The Flash will explore the DCEU's version of Flashpoint, a storyline from the comics that sees Barry go back in time to stop his mother's murder, only to then unleash drastic consequences on the timeline. The Flash will explore the DC multiverse in a big way, and it will do that through the inclusion of additional heroes. Sasha Calle will make her franchise debut as Supergirl, while Ben Affleck will return to play Batman. He won't be the Flash's only Caped Crusader though, as Keaton will also play Batman for the movie. Keaton hasn't portrayed the character since '92's Batman's Returns, yet his performance remains one of the definitive iterations of the hero. It's the multiverse that makes Keaton's return possible, yet the actor had a hard time wrapping his head around it. In a new profile with THR, Keaton admitted he needed a few read-throughs and explanations to truly grasp how the Flash's story works. He also rejected the idea that this is him trying to be too cool to understand a superhero movie. Keaton said, no, he genuinely doesn't get it. Because he's not into it. And that's fine. That's fine. Actors don't have to be into it. They just have to respect it. I had to read it more than 3 times to go, wait, how does this work? They had to explain that to me several times. By the way, I'm not being arrogant. I hope about this. I don't say it like, oh, I'm too groovy, I'm stupid. There's a lot of things I don't know about, and so I don't know. I just kind of figured it out, that this was different. It's interesting how he kind of was just nodding his head when they were explaining it to him in Morbius, for example. Is it Morbius he's in? I think so. And he didn't get it and they said you don't understand, but here he reread his script 3 times and he started to get it, and he's kind of into it now as well, which is cool. Keaton's return as Batman in Flash is perhaps the most eagerly anticipated part of the movie. Set photos have showed glimpses of him on set, and Keaton himself has spoken highly of the way the Flash introduces Batman. He's expected to play a sort of mentor role for Barry, and it isn't yet clear if he will share the screen with Ben Affleck's Batman. At the same time, when Keaton's return was announced last year, it was said he could appear in additional DC movies after The Flash. The DCEU isn't the only superhero universe that's delving into the multiverse, as the MCU is dipping its toes into the complex concept as well. It remains to be seen exactly how The Flash will introduce it, but it likely has something to do with Barry's time-travelling adventure. The mixture of the multiverse and time travel sounds like an ambitious plot, so it's no wonder that Keaton would feel a bit overwhelmed when reading it for the first time. Fortunately, it sounds like he's on board now. The Flash will bring massive changes to the DCEU, and audiences can't wait to see them all unfold. Let me just give you a distinct comparison to how the MCU are dealing with the multiverse and how the DCEU will starting in the Flashpoint movie. So I think with the MCU, it's a bit more complex and they're overdoing it a bit. With the DCEU, you're going to see the Flash movie. They're going to say, right, he's so fast, he went back, changed the future. It's the butterfly effect. That means when he goes back, it's all fucked over and it's all different, right? And he's created a brand new world. It's simple. From that world, and because he's done this, no matter how much he tries to fix it, he reboots the whole thing, which changes everything. That's a really clever way. Now, to be clear, the MCU don't have to change everything. The MCU's doing fine, thank you very much. But the DCEU does need rebooting, and it's needed rebooting since Justice League. And it's as simple as that. And that comes from someone who loves the Snyderverse. But we've gone far beyond the Snyderverse being the central thing now. They've got to do this. They need to take this gamble. Let's see how it works out. And finally today, you know, I'm really excited for Aquaman 2 and the Lost Kingdom. And a lot of people say to me, oh, I don't care about that film, Amber Heard's in it. I'm so pumped. And finally, James Wan's been talking a little bit about his plans. and they're very exciting plans if you ask me. Aquaman 2 director reveals surprising vampire horror movie inspiration. Wow. Director James Wan was inspired by the 1965 Italian horror film Planet of the Vampires for the DCEU sequel, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, by Paul Shearer. Now, Paul Shearer, he's a good guy, and he's just started writing for Screen Rant, which is really cool. I do follow him on Twitter. Director James Wan has revealed that an old Italian vampire film is a heavy inspiration for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, the sequel to 2018's Aquaman. After taking a break to make the horror film Malignant, the filmmaker is returning to the superhero franchise and is now back behind the camera for the next chapter in Arthur Curry's story. Jason Momoa returns to the titular role of Aquaman, with Amber Heard, Patrick Wilson, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II also reprising their roles. Joining the cast is Game of Thrones' Alan Pilu Aspect, who is rumoured to be playing the villain of the sequel. Although filming is currently underway on the sequel, little is known about the plot details. Not much is known beyond stars Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, Patrick Wilson, Amber Heard posting cryptic photos on Instagram, teasing their return. Still, speculation has been rampant on just what the film could be about. Abdul-Mateen II has shared that he believes the script for the sequel is better than the first, giving his character of Black Manta more room to breathe, with a lot of good storytelling moments. Now there's a new tease of information about the sequel, this time coming from director James Wan. Speaking to Total Film, Wan shared that Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is heavily inspired by the 1965 Italian horror film Planet of the Vampires. You can take the boy out of horror, but you can never take the horror out of the boy. Wan told the magazine, going on to explain how he held back some of the darker elements for the first film, but is ready to explore those elements for the sequel. Read this full quote below. Well, the first movie takes a lot of people by surprise, right? And that's partially because they were not familiar with the comic book, which deals in this very, lurid, strange world. People were talking about that. I didn't throw all that stuff away and make a dark, heavy film, but I didn't feel that would have been right for it. So with the second film, I feel it will be easier for people to accept where we go, because I've already laid the foundation. Very interesting. Planet of the Vampires was released in 1965 and directed by Italian filmmaker Mario Bava, and has often been regarded as a big influence for Ridley Scott's Alien. The film centres on two spaceships that receive a distress signal from an unexplored planet. Interesting. Upon approach and landing, the crew finds themselves possessed by vampire-like entities and begins killing each other. The disembodied inhabitants of the planet are attempting to escape by taking over human bodies and venturing into a new world. Could this be what we're getting? It's interesting and it's different. Wow. It's no secret that Wan's horror roots are deeply embedded, and even with him holding back in the first Aquaman film, some of the sequences showed his affinity for the genre, particularly in the trench sequence. How deeply Planet of the Vampires will influence Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, or in what specific ways, is unknown, but the implication films like reanimated possessed cults may be on the cards for the sequel. Wan brought Aquaman to life in a way never thought possible, leading it to a 1.1 billion box office haul. So there's undoubtedly a strong level of trust in his vision to steer the sequel deeper and darker on a similar course. Very, very interesting. Now, I knew that James would go darker. It's natural for a second movie to go darker. It's the right way for it to go. Patty Jenkins made a huge mistake going lighter rather than darker and giving us something very, very interesting and exciting. But this sounds interesting, because if we are getting if we got this kind of zombie story where everyone's like killing each other and stuff, it's going to be fucking nuts. And where's this going to be set? Underwater? On land? Nobody knows. So very, very exciting that James Wan is embracing his horror roots to do something a lot darker. And I think we could get something very interesting, very unique and very different. And I can't wait to fandom to hear more about it and finally see the movie. This has been Thursday's edition of the Movies TV Mad Daily. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. I will see you again in the next video. Until then, goodbye.